Heaven and Hell by E. Wallis Budge, 1905, the third volume of the original edition, and, well, this is just a reprint, so I can share and comment on it for spiritual reasons, is called The Contents of the Books of the Other World Described and Compared. And the introduction is Chapter 1. Well, Chapter 1 is the origin of illustrated guides to the other world. These tombs vary greatly in details, just as they do in size and in the arrangement and number of their chambers, but it seems that each tomb was intended to represent the underworld, and that the ceremonies which were performed in it, as the mummy was taken from the entrance to the last chamber in which it was to rest, were highly symbolical. Does anybody say symbolical? And that the progress of the body through the tomb was so far as it was possible made to resemble that of the sun god. Well, the so-called sun god is Yef, through the hours of the night in the other world. The religious text with which the walls of the royal tombs are decorated do not consist of extracts from the funeral works of the ancient and middle empires, but of the sections from a work entitled Yim Duat, i.e., the book of What is in the Duat, our underworld, and many of these are illustrated more or less fully with colored pictures of the entities, mythological scenes, etc. The rubrics show that the portions of this work belong to remote antiquity, and many of the beliefs which appear in it are the products of the period when the Egyptians were partially, if not wholly, savages. Honestly, if you look at the so-called savages, less violent, got along better with their neighbors and their family, and, but largely, I'm sure it's less Christian-seeming, right? In the book itself, numbers of entities and mythological beings are mentioned whose names are not found elsewhere in the Egyptian literature. As we find it in the tombs of the royal followers of Yemen, the book Yim Duat contains all the dogmas and doctrines which the priest of Yemen held concerning the future life and the estate and condition of the dead, as it is quite easy to see that the great object of those who compiled it was to prove that Yemen Ra was not only the head of the entities in heaven and the ruler of the world with he had created, but also the king of all the entities of the dead and the master of all the beings who were in the underworld. Now, there are certainly different types of entities that a person will encounter in the afterlife, but in this life, there's entities that kind of connect to the issue. Certainly, it can be said that a lot of the necromancy does not involve actual things that are able to make it to there at this current point. In other words, the priest of Yemen asserted that the absolute sovereignty of their entity and their own religious supremacy. It is, however, interesting to note that certain kings did not entirely shake off their belief in Osiris, Yasir, and the efficiency of the chapters of the Book of Coming Forth by Day, for Thothmes III was swathed in a linen sheet on which was written a copy of the 154th chapter, and the Yemenhotep III was rolled up in sheets wherein extracts from several chapters of that work were inscribed. Setting the first went a good deal further, for although fully illustrated copies of the division 1 through 11, of 12, of the book Yim Duat were painted on the walls of his tomb, and he took to have a complete copy of the Book of the Gates, which the full illustrations and copies of the 72nd and 89th chapters of the Book of the Coming Forth by Day, cut on his alabaster sarcophagus. The chapter which Thutmosis III believed to be all-powerful was entitled Chapter of Not Letting the Body Perish. And if its words really express his convictions, he must have been terrified at the idea of this material body falling into dust and decay, and must have hoped for its resurrection through Osiris, just like a Christian wishes through Jesus. But as to clarify what I meant earlier is that, hey, what the Bible has to say about early Christianity and some other the Didache, which was written before some portions that were later, after these books were started, that we have in the New Testament, then, but some people look at these people, make a very limited judgment and say, oh, well, they must be savages because, Come Forth the Day, kind of alabaster sarcophagus. But one of the things that a lot of people are going to say is that, oh, I have the Ani Papyrus, which I have that book right there, thank you very much. And, they think it's all the same. The chapters are the same, it's the same number of chapters and all this other stuff, and it's not. I'm sorry. There's a lot of variation, as I'm pointing out here. And, the rest of this book is already made clear. The chapters which Seti I had cut into a sarcophagus are entitled The Chapter of Coming Forth by Day and of Making a Way Through the Immehet, and the chapter of causing the soul to be united to its body in the underworld. In the former, he declares that, see within chapter 4, page 85, okay, he knows the names of the entities who preside over the otherworld, and also the proper words of power. Because he has this knowledge, he demands a mission in the Suksit Yaru, a portion of Osiris's kingdom, of Suksit Hatepet, and a constant and abundant supply of wheat, for bread, barley for beer, later to be, the cake and then the wine, incense, unguents, etc., and the power to assume any form he pleases at will. And that's one of the things you see in the Egyptians, the animal forms, the plant forms, the mineral forms, the animal forms, even other human forms. These are shamanistic tools, in a matter of speaking, for pathworking and other such things. In the latter, he calls upon certain entities to make his soul rejoin its body, and addressing the entities who tow the boat of millions of years, he asks them to cause him to be born from the womb of the sky. The demoness Nut, Nuit Hadet Rahu Kuit, the Thelmic Trinity. Well, just the chapter 1 and this one. In the eastern horizon of heaven daily, forever. It has already been said that a complete illustrated copy of the Book of Gates was also inscribed on the sarcophagus of Seti I, and it is not easy to explain this fact until we remember that the important position which it makes Osiris to hold in the otherworld, that the book is formed of very ancient materials, is evident from the last sections, which certainly contain magical text and pictures specially prepared with the object of making the sun to rise. And there is little doubt that the latter are representations of the ceremonies which the primitive Egyptians advanced. A lot of these so-called primitive cultures were advanced in ways that we're actually not, or we're just becoming advanced in, and, actually performed to produce that most desirable effect. The earlier sections of the book are full of magical ideas, but scattered among them are expressions of beliefs which it seems must belong to a later period of civilization, and passages which impress the reader with the idea that they were composed by men who believed that the righteous would be rewarded, and the wicked would be punished in the world to come. A lot of these ideas go a lot further back than we have, but this savage philosopher, goddesses to God, monotheism, but then, well, not quite. We want to go Christian. This sort of Orientalist sort of progression. This is what we're seeing described here. That belief imposed of their superiority would be rewarded, and the wicked would be punished in the world to come. Special prominence is given to the conception of the judgment, wherein Osiris is the judge of the dead. As the result of this judgment, the righteous have allotments of land meted out to them, which vary in size according to their deserts, and the wicked are slain, and their bodies cut into pieces, and their souls are destroyed. In many particulars, the views of the Book of Gates concerning the future state agree closely with those of the Book of Coming Forth by Day. The net result of the facts stated in the last two paragraphs proves that Seti I relied for salvation upon the protection, part magical, part religious. Magical, the art and science of religion, afforded by the sacred writings of the two great schools of religious thought, the leaders of which in his day preached opposing and contradictory doctrines, as even we believe the Bible to be the Word of God as far as it is translated correctly, or however they phrase that. A lot of contradictory doctrines even within that, but at least over 1,300. If you're going to be purely literal comparison, and then there's interpretation and, so that sort of thing's nothing new. It may be argued that by filling the walls of his tomb and sarcophagus with texts of such books, he was merely acting from the point of view of religious expediency, wishing to indicate his impartiality in respect of the followers of Yemen and the followers of Yasir, in his respect for the ancient traditional beliefs, however material, crude, and impossible they may have appeared to him personally. This, however, is unlikely to have been the case, and it is far more probable that he believed every religious or funeral text to have its own special value as a means of salvation, and that he selected for inscribing on the walls of his tomb and sarcophagus those which he thought would be the most likely to secure for him in the next world an existence which would be at once happy and everlasting. Okay, so in the opening of the tape of the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada talks about the liberation or salvation or being saved, or however you're not going to phrase it. It's the very least thing. Oh, it's of utmost importance. But compared to the rest of your spiritual work, this is just opening the gate here. Remember how I talked about the 70,000 veils and other such issues? This is, it's so minuscule compared to the rest of your becoming. But hey, you do want to be, or some people are going to use the word damned because, the path that they were part of, they're no longer part of that and they have to step off in a new thing. And I guess that's part of why I give out the 9 vibrations, is to address that, is to, some people want a new name or something special for their initiation, and that's, what I'm doing there. There's other things to explain about that, but anyways. Therefore, Seti I provided himself with amulets, Ushaptio figures, U is the plural, at the end. Figures, magical formula, pictures of entities and fiends to be used in working sympathetic magic, religious formula, and copies of hymns and funeral works, an inscribed tomb and sarcophagus, etc. In fact, he was painfully anxious to admit nothing from the inscriptions in his tomb which would propitiate any entity, or appease the wrath and turn aside the opposition of any of the fiends wherewith he had filled his underworld. So, working with the forces, the sympathetic magic, there's variations, your own personal symbolism and stuff that you can work with that. But some say magical because you are, but basic religion, if you step away from the priestcraft, is not the priest and the so-called savior gods are going to do something for you, or they did something for you. It's that you're doing your own spiritual work yourself, and you're active in your consciousness. You're willfully changing your consciousness. You're looking towards art and science to accomplish what you will with your relationship with what you worship, and the rest of and all of creation, all of existence, however you phrase it, that sort of regulation. And yes, the infernal people, that word can be used for them too, because it definitely involves how they react with their entities and whatnot too. But Sharma, peace be unto you. And I guess maybe I should hail,